I've had the privilege of praying in tongues with many other believers. Because of that privilege, I observed many things related to praying in tongues. One of the many observations I made led me to discover an important praying in tongues tip that turned out to be very beneficial in my growth. The tip is a solution to a common praying in tongues problem that many believers used to struggle with. I had a similar struggle, and I still see many believers with the same struggle today. The praying in tongues tip is often overlooked. In fact, it is so overlooked that some preachers directly discourage it. Little do they know they are denying the key to deep spiritual encounters. There is even a whole Bible story highlighting how important this tip is, as you will see. Today, I'll be sharing how I discovered the tip, what the tip is, and a detailed explanation why the tip works. I hope this lesson will help you grow in your praying in tongues gift to great spiritual levels. In the fellowship I was attending, people were freely praying in tongues. At first, I didn't notice any difference in how different people prayed in tongues. But after a short stay in the fellowship, I quickly noticed an interesting pattern. Almost 90% of the encounters and visions were experienced by ladies. Being a man, that wasn't very good news. Are we not all praying in tongues to the same God? Why are ladies getting more visions and encounters than men? I wondered. The population of ladies in the fellowship was higher than that of men. Someone could easily say the chance of a lady having an encounter or seeing a vision was higher because their population in the fellowship was also higher. While that was true, the percentage of women getting encounters compared to their population was higher than that of men getting encounters compared to their population. This rather carnal observation was the beginning of a journey that would lead me to discover an important praying in tongues tip. One time, I casually asked a male friend of mine in the fellowship, why is it that almost every encounter and vision comes from a sister? I wanted to see if someone else had also seen the glaring disparity between men getting encounters and sisters getting encounters. You've also noticed it? You are the man of God. Tell us. My friend replied, I don't know. That is why I'm asking. I responded, I think they are just blessed. Anyway, we will marry them, my friend replied casually. I laughed it off on the surface, but deep down, I was restless to know the secret. Sometime later, the church organized a youth seminar. In the youth seminar, there was a session for us to ask questions. I felt that would be a good opportunity for me to ask the question that had bothered me for a couple of months. However, I was a little scared to ask the question because it seemed unspiritual. I wasn't sure if the church leaders would get my point for asking the seemingly unspiritual question, but because I was burning with curiosity, I decided to ask the question with a little twist. What do people do to get encounters and see visions when they speak in tongues? I asked. They are yielded to God, I was told. How do I yield to God? I followed up. Open your heart, I was told. How do I open my heart? I asked. Haha. This brother is not serious. The leader laughed off my question. I was a bit offended, but because we had been taught not to harbor bitterness, I quietly asked God to help me contain my anger. The seminar ended, but the question I had remained unanswered. All I could do was to work with the vague answers that I had been given. That is exactly what I did. The next time we prayed in tongues and the ladies had encounters, I observed to see how they yielded to God and opened their hearts. I was hoping to see something I could copy from the sisters. Sure enough, I observed the sisters just before they had encounters and noted something. Most of them were very expressive in their worship and prayer. Basically, they would lift up their hands, jump up and down, scream, roll on the floor uncountable times, etc. It was a legitimate observation, but the thought of copying what I saw sent chills down my spine. After observing the same trend multiple times in several church services, I was convinced that was the secret. It was the only thing that ladies did a lot, but men barely ever did it. It was perceived as a feminine trait, and honestly, it made some sisters look mad. Because that was the only finding I came up with, I had no option but to give it a try. I picked one Sunday where I would test the finding. On that Sunday, as the praying and worship continued, I lifted up my hands. I wasn't feeling any urge to do so. I just did it because that is what I had seen those sisters doing. My eyes were closed and I did my best not to think about what other people were thinking about me. After about 10 minutes of repeatedly lifting up my hands and being very expressive in my worship and praying in tongues, I started feeling so much joy. The joy came with a very strong urge to scream and jump. I braced myself and gave in to the strong feelings that I was getting. Before I knew it, I was jumping and screaming at the top of my voice like a madman. I was so caught up in the moment, I could barely tell what was going on. All that mattered was to express the sweet feeling that I was experiencing. It felt like being in a completely new universe with so much freedom. The experience lasted for a few minutes before I felt unusual fatigue and heaviness. The fatigue and heaviness instantly made me fall on the floor. I was so exhausted I couldn't even open my eyes. Then I began seeing a rather clear image of myself flying upwards towards the stars. Then a clear memory of God telling Abraham his children would be numerous like the stars came to me. It felt as if I was there when God was speaking to Abraham about the promise. The vision then faded and all I could see was darkness. After the experience, I was so eager for the next fellowship so that I experience it again. Some of my male friends in the fellowship came to ask me how the experience felt. I was so glad for trying out what I had observed the sisters doing. Good for me, it worked out perfectly. Having tested the experience, it was easy for me to analyze why it worked and how to replicate it. In the fellowships that followed, I had so many encounters from what I learned that even sisters came to ask me what special thing I was doing. I had a good answer for them. In the Bible, there is a story in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6 where David danced as the Ark of the Covenant was being brought to the city of David. His dance was so intense that the linen robe that he was wearing came off. In the process, his wife Michal despised him for what she described as being undignified given that he was a king. David defended his actions, saying his dance was before the Lord, who made him king in the first place. Michal was punished with barrenness all her life for despising David's dance before the Lord, as the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6 verse 23 tells us. This story confirms what I discovered from the sisters. If you want to pray in tongues to deep spiritual levels, you must involve your deepest emotions. For your deepest emotions to come out, you must use every part of your body to express yourself. The moment you release yourself fully to pray in tongues and worship God, the host of heaven will join you to praise the Lord. In the process, you will be lifted up to the heavenly realms where creation glorifies God day and night. The number of things you can experience in those realms is beyond description. In church, the sisters were easily expressing their deepest emotions to God and getting all manner of encounters, while men held back their deepest emotions in the name of being dignified and missed out. When I decided to do what the sisters were doing, I became undignified, but the joy I felt was too sweet. In the subsequent fellowships, I became even more expressive in my praying in tongues and worship, and the heavenly experiences drastically increased. I would speak in tongues very loudly, throwing my hands in the air, jumping up and down, screaming, and everything in between. I looked like a madman, but I would tell myself, I'm not even a king like David. What do I have to lose? Some preachers don't like that kind of madness, and they discourage believers in the name of God is a God of order. Other praying in tongues believers hold back their emotions and end up struggling with the dry tongues, not knowing that they are the architects of their own misery. From the experience, I learned that God desires to see us express our deepest emotions to Him. Therefore, always pour your deepest emotions into praying in tongues. You will appear undignified, but God will reward you with the sweetest joy known to man. God bless you.